dead leaf on this plant that I want to pull out.
Well, we can, as you're pulling out a dead leaf, I can do this. Welcome to the Academy of Esports podcast. I'm your host, James O'Hagan. I have the pleasure today to meet with Callum Fletcher. He is the head, no, not the head coach anymore. You are the director of esports for Illinois Wesleyan University. Because when I think esports, when I think sports, when I think collegiate, there's Alabama, Notre Dame, Arizona State when it comes to baseball. Mm-hmm. And then when it comes to esports, Illinois Wesleyan is in that same vein as like a big school. Callum, thank you for being a guest on the Academy of Esports podcast today.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me. Thanks. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, Illinois Wesleyan. I've lived in the south suburbs all around the Chicago area for many years. I went to Purdue University just straight east of you, not too far away.
Right.
And Illinois Wesleyan is not a school where I would say, hey, where is esports excellence in the United States? What's the colleges that are doing it? And the answer still is like, the Maryvilles and the UCIs. And again, the Illinois Wesleyan. So What is it about Illinois Wesleyan that you said, you know what, this is the place I want to be and this is where I want to start this?
Yeah. It's actually a funny story how I got started at Illinois Wesleyan. So I was at my last job at an arcade studio called Play Mechanics. You will know it as Big Buck Hunter. Mm-hmm. And so I was looking for new opportunities in esports. I was looking for just kind of a broad array of things. I didn't really have any plan on going into collegiate esports. I didn't really pay much attention to it at the time, to be totally honest with you. Mm-hmm. And I was scrolling through Indeed and I saw a job posting and I was like, oh, hey, okay, that could be kind of cool. I know some people that went to school there. Mm-hmm. And I looked at the job posting and it was literally like every single line on the job posting I had experience in, and I hit quite literally everything. And then I got to like the bonus lines and I was like, oh, I hit everything here too. Like I'm literally perfect for this job. And then I get to the very bottom and it says, job posting closed 12 days ago. Oh. And I'm seriously sitting here just like, there's no way I'm like this sits with me, right? And so I called the HR department at Illinois Wesleyan the next day and I said, hey, I know this job posting is closed. I don't know where you're at in the interview process. I hit every single thing you guys are looking for. Please let me send an application to you, even if you just put it in like a to-go pile. And they were like, sure, shoot us over an email with your application. So I sent over an email with my resume and cover letter. They called me back the next day for an interview, and 2 or 3 weeks later, I was hired. So I don't know if I'd ever say like, why Illinois Wesleyan? Oh, well, I wanted to go here because of this, and this. Mm-hmm. And I think the conversation has turned more into like why I stay at Illinois Wesleyan.
That's a great point. But well, go ahead. What you've been able to do in the last 3 years that you've been there. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't think they ever expected esports to be what you've made it.
Right. Well, and so like I went to Illinois Wesleyan. It's a good school, right? And I had a lot of friends. I've lived in Illinois for a lot of my life now, and I know the area. And my sister went to school at Illinois State, which is in the same town. So why I came here, it's a good school. And when I was interviewing, they gave me a very clear sense of like, we want this to be successful and we want to support this. And it was kind of really, it was powerful for me because I got to come into this understanding that like, I'm the expert, right? I'm being brought in to build this program from the ground up. And it truly gave me a sense of like, we believe in you to do what you're coming here to say that we're going to do. Which was really cool because I think unlike a lot of people, I got a totally blank canvas. Mm-hmm. Where I quite literally got to come into this institution, build what I wanted to build. It will be as successful as I want it to be. And then the school is so supportive of it that it has allowed us to kind of elevate it beyond what is the standard, right? So like, as you said, like the university wanted it to be successful. I wanted to be successful, but like nobody expected it to be. And I was talking with my girlfriend literally like 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I was saying it's so weird that I have zero collegiate experience before coming to Illinois Wesleyan, and now I'm speaking at like the Esports Business Summit about like collegiate esports, right? And I'm on like the Evil Geniuses podcast, and I'm on the Academy of Esports podcast, right? And like,
thank you for putting me with all those people, by the way. That's kind of awesome.
But like, it's fascinating to come in. I'm 29 years old now. with zero experience in this space, and people care about what I have to say, which is weird. But we're rolling with it.
Well, let's back up for a second before you got to that. Where did you grow up?
Yeah, so born and raised in England. I came over here when I was.
I will not hold that against you.
Look, I don't care what anyone says. English food is better than American food.
How do you feel about the English breakfast?
I love it.
Oh, it's such trash.
Wrong.
Oh my God, it's such hot garbage.
Okay, whatever. But chicken and gravy on.
No.
Like country steaks. Get out of here with that.
No, because even when my girlfriend and I go to Ireland. She's all about the Irish breakfast, and I've had it a couple of times, and I'm like, oh no, you're
biased. The Irish, come on.
I'm biased against the Irish breakfast too. It's also trash.
But I think one of my favorite things is English bacon. Which
rashers?
Like thick English cuts of bacon. My heart be still.
Yeah, your heart will also be still.
Will be with the amount of English bacon. But like we'll order. So like there's a pie company in New York that makes English pies, and we'll order pies and bacon and all that. So yeah, I'm born and raised in England, and then I lived in the West Sussex till I was about 9, and then moved over here, lived here since. So.
But where around, you grew up around the Chicago area, yeah?
Yeah, so a town called Wheaton, which is about 45 minutes west of the city center.
So you went to Wheaton, Warrenville North or South?
Lombard West, baby.
Oh, you went to Glen? Okay.
Yeah.
So while you were probably in high school, I was a tech director in DuPage County, and I probably knew the tech director for the school there. And so I know where you're coming from. And here's the interesting thing. It's not just the... like, as you said, well, first of all, you're not an educator going to a school, to be a coach.
Right.
Your pro player experience was, and I love this when you said this, I said, let's not talk about this, but we're going to come back to this in a minute. Buck hunt. Yep. That's your pro player experience. But what I found too, is that the experience a lot of people have had in their high schools, just having that like a really nurturing experience can kind of lead to these things of trying new things out. Like, the Glenbards are kind of the same way as well. Glenbrook North, Glenbrook South, there's all these really cool things that happen in high schools that sometimes kids carry that experience with them forward, trying new things out and being kind of adventurous. You did, I mean, it's pretty brave to look at something at Illinois Wesleyan and go, I check every box, but I'm not, you don't fit the mold right now of what a collegiate esports coach looks like.
Yeah. So for me, my background's a little funny because parents always laugh at this when I'm recruiting, and I'll tell them, like, my major is law enforcement and homeland security. I did not do great in high school. I would not have gotten into Illinois Wesleyan University as a high school student looking to go to college. I never really knew where and what I wanted to do. But I was always passionate about gaming. Always. I mean, for me, it was a social kind of retreat, right? Like I wasn't the most popular kid in junior high school. And I had some issues. And so I would quite literally, I would come home, jump on my Xbox and play Halo with all my buddies and friends that I made around the country. And some of which I still I was literally playing with a guy last night that I met in 2005. Okay. And so for me, it was this kind of just retreat, right? Then I started getting good and started competing and traveling, and then I got into content creation and all that. But as far as schooling goes, I wanted to go into law enforcement and homeland security. And then in my last semester of school, I was like, okay, well, I don't want to do that. And so for me, esports has always been something that I've known and have been passionate about and supportive of, and not even at the highest high of pro level play, right? Just every element of it, creating the community and being involved and having people that you can communicate with and hang out with and all that. So I guess I don't traditionally fit the mold of a typical esports director. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. But
there's really not a mold, is there? I mean, this is so new to some people. It can be defined a myriad of ways. What's amazing to me is how people want to put it in the athletics box, or people want to put it in the activities box. And in my school district, what I've done, and again, K-12 is very different than collegiate, and we could talk about that separation all day if we want to, because Riot loves to put us all together, but I know we're not. But my program is funded through my digital virtual learning program. Mm-hmm. It doesn't fit under either one.
Right.
I don't get why so many people are trying to put something that's so uniquely different and can be powerful for a campus and put it into like these round holes or square pegs.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, because so to be totally transparent, I think there is, I think there are a variety of skill sets that you can come into this space and be successful with, and it doesn't always have to be esports. Mm-hmm. More so, I think at the high school level. Than in the collegiate level, right? Because at the collegiate level, I think there's some expectation that, right, you should have a competitive program or competitive teams, and what does that mean, and what does that look like in the structure? I think on the high school level, you're more focusing about kind of giving tools to students to be successful, not only in high school but afterwards, right? And I think you can do that with a communications background. I think you can do that with an educational focus and an educational background. And I think you can do that in the college space, but having that experience in esports is pretty significant. And I think there's a lot of people that come into this space that like, I hate to say it, but shouldn't be in the space. And I don't necessarily mean that in like a vengeful way by any means, but like if you have no experience and your experience is maybe just playing games, right? Like, and that's where you come from, and you're not focusing on the community piece, or you're not focusing on the esports side and like the competitive teams. Like, what are you really building for your students? If you're here just to the collegiate esports industry, in my opinion, is so young and infant, like in its infancy, that there is still a lot of influence to be had all over the place, right? And we're at a point where like bad programs do reflect badly on the space. We're not at this like critical mass yet where there's like a one-stop shop way to do it, right?
No. But even with let's think back to I know you're in England, born and raised, partially at least. But let's go back to the beginnings of American football, even, which was in a lot of ways rugby. I played rugby for many years, and it's a sport that was born in England. In rugby, that's the big, they named the game after the school, I think, is where it was. But it was so similar in a lot of ways, where there was no rules. The structure was like, you call up somebody and say, hey, let's have a football game over here. And, you travel. But again, even when you got there, you had to decide on what the rules were going to be, what the construct was going to be. Nowadays, conferences have kind of different ways that they do certain things. Or I guess the culture around them is a little different. Like the SEC, nobody would ever say the SEC is all about academics. Right. For example, versus the Ivy League. Okay. But I think what's great about this right now is that we know so much, at least, about, I feel like we're so much smarter than we were back then. I'd like to think in a lot of ways. Right. That what you talked about, it's not about the game so much as the community building that takes place. Because to me, that's what this is more about, is like you're trying to build a responsible community where your program isn't going to be a grind mill that is used to take a kid, whether they're diamond or platinum in whatever game it is, have them go for 60 hours a week and then maybe get a degree at some point. Right. No, I totally agree. And I think we're in such a cool space right now at the age that it's in, because we do like have so much influence of how it's going to be done. And every school has this kind of opportunity to change the way it's done, right? Do something new. You look at Maryville, right? Maryville was one of the first schools that really sunk its teeth into competitive rosters and bringing in big teams.
You look at University California Irvine, and they're one of the first schools that really sunk their teeth into this bigger than life staffing structure that supports so much more than just the students at their school, right? They have these these high school federations and what have you. And you look at Full Sail down in Florida, and you have this whole like, oh, okay, they're totally changing the game when it comes to the events and the space that they're able to use. And you look at Utah, and that you're able to say like, oh, they're really investing in their game design involved with their esports program, right? So we're at this kind of cool space where like everybody has the opportunity to inject their own twist of like what collegiate esports should look like. And I think I said this a few times like a week or two ago. I think there's going to be a time where like a power school is going to invest in bringing in people from a cool little variety of these institutions, and say like, hey, okay, we're bringing you in to focus on this piece, and you in to focus on this piece, and you in to focus on this piece. And it's going to be game changing again. I think the ecosystem that we have now will not exist in 5 years because it's going to look totally different. It's obviously not going anywhere, but you're totally right. Like right now we are in like the very like primitive stages of esports, in the collegiate space, hell, even in the pro space, right? Like pro esports have only been around for 20 years. Like that's baby stuff. Right. And so what's it going to look like in 5 or 10 years? Nobody knows, but it's cool to have the opportunity to kind of help try and put your infusion in it.
But it's so fragile right now, wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
Like,
well, again,
we live in our own echo chambers. We live in these spaces where, you know, hey, you go out on LinkedIn or you go out on Twitter or you go on Twitch, and everybody's so supportive because they get what you're doing. But how are you at Illinois Wesleyan inviting in people? Because I imagine that, like, for example, when Akron announced their esports investment in their program, at the same time, like literally almost the same day, they said, oh, by the way, we're also cutting like 80 majors.
Yep.
Okay. The messaging, I feel bad. I forget what the guy's name who's the head coach at Akron, but I felt bad for that person coming into that. When you came on campus at Illinois Wesleyan, who did you have to convince, or did you have to convince people that this was going to be something, like the investment was worth what it was going to be?
Right. So yeah, it's funny because I actually just had a conversation with one of my coaches, literally like 45 minutes ago about strategic investment and approaches to esports and what have you. And when I came on board at Illinois Wesleyan, we had already committed to X, Y, and Z, right? We'd already committed to a facility to practice and train in. League of Legends was the only game we were going to play, and the goal was we were going to bring in 12 students. And so that was the commitment that the university already made. And they basically said, want you to come in and help us make it a reality. So when I joined the university, there was already a very clear understanding that there was going to be a level of commitment, right? Which I think is really, really powerful, because I think a lot of schools will come in and say, hey, we're going to put in X, Y, and Z, and people who don't necessarily have experience in this space or don't know what's right or wrong in this space, like they're going to say, oh, hell yeah, I'm going to get a 5 computer lab with 20 kids or whatever, like, right. And so I came in with this expectation. And then after our first year, I turned around to the school and said, hey, and my boss, Dr. Carla Carney Hall is one of the most intelligent, brilliant women I've ever met. She is fierce. She is passionate. She is genuinely awesome. Great mentor and guide for me. And so I was able to go to Carla and say, hey, I think we can do more with this, right? Here's what I think we can do. And then over the course of the next like year or two, Carla and I worked together pretty closely to kind of figure out what does that look like? Where's it going to go? How do we propose this? How do we navigate these waters? Right. And so I was never in a situation where like I was just cast to the wild, right? I was brought in pretty autonomous and said, like, we trust you to build what you're telling us you're going to build. And I was able to do that. And then as we decided to elevate and grow, there was someone that I could always call on as a mentor and say like, hey, I'm not sure how to navigate this specific proposal, or like, I'm speaking to the CFO of the university. What sort of resources do I have to have present? So to get our most recent expansion, whether you've seen it or not, we're 50.
Oh, I've seen it. I'll make sure to put it in the show notes as well too.
Yeah. So we've got a 5,700 square foot facility. We've just hired 2 more full-time staff, bringing us to 3 total. And we've added 3 new games. So we have 5 total now.
What games are those?
So we have League of Legends, Overwatch, Rocket League, Smash Brothers, and Fortnite.
So I have 5 high schools that play 4 of those games. If you're looking for people, you're welcome to come on up. Yeah.
Always. And I'll extend the invite. You're welcome to come on down too, right? Like if you guys want to have a day in the space and play in our facility and have our coaches meet your students, by all means, have them come.
Probably not now though.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, we're fully on campus. We are,
really,
we're in, and we've had 0 cases in esports.
That's great. I'm happy for you guys. We are Wisconsin's a little bit of a hot spot right now.
It's an interesting year for everyone, but yeah. So to answer your question of like, who do we have to convince? You've got to get stakeholder support across a variety of people, right? So obviously your leadership team at the university, other academic programmings have to be supportive of it. There's a lot of revenue generating opportunities in esports that typically aren't tapped into right now, such as summer camps or speaker events, tournaments, things like this, facility usage or rental, whatever it may be. And so like for us, people always say like, oh man, how did you guys get X, Y, and Z? It wasn't easy. I mean, I presented to 3 different presidents over a year and a half or 2 years.
Wow. Yeah.
We had a president who was on his way out when we first presented it. We had an interim president who loved it, but decided that it wasn't an appropriate commitment for an interim president to make. And then we have our new president, Georgia, who is the first female president of our university, and she totally rocks. I'm a big fan. And she came in and believed in the vision, right? And so once we had that kind of 3-level tier of support from my leadership team, her leadership team, and then the president of the university, it was a no-brainer to dive in.
That is really that's probably the best answer I've heard when asked. Well, seriously, because for some people they it was almost like their esports program was gifted to them, and it was a big press release, and it was like, oh, you bought a bunch of computers and you made it look really nice, and then you never hear from them again.
Yep.
And you're like, what's going on? What are you doing over there? It's.
I think we're one of the and I hate to sound like we're tooting our own horn here, but I think we're
though. Go ahead, do it.
I think we're one of the few programs that has really taken like the baseline of what we're doing and then taken it 10 steps higher, right? We have quite literally, we've been a program for 3 years. And in our first year, we had a team. Our second year, we expanded into Fortnite. And our third year, we expanded into a 5,700 square foot facility, right? There has never been a point where you've looked at Illinois Wesleyan Esports and saw complacency or slowed down, right? And so we're doing things the right way. We've brought in new staff members, right? I mean, how many esports programs do you know in the collegiate space that have 2 full-time staff, let alone 3?
Well, let's talk about that really quickly here, because you've been very vocal, and rightly so. I will say this, that our esports program that we have here in Racine, where we started with 1 general manager at 1 school, no jerseys, the chairs were, it was basically the computers and like wooden tables and chairs. We have a staff of 12 now between the 5 high schools that are paid, and they're paid.
Good.
That's the other big thing too.
Hell yeah.
With you have again said, these people who think you can do this on the cheap or do it with 1 person and expect them to handle 4 or 5 different things, that just doesn't work out.
Yeah, schools need to dive in. If a school approaches me and says like, okay, but like, if I were to do it with $40,000 investment, like what can I do? And I often tell them, don't. If you're not going to dive into esports, don't dive in, because you're going to do a misjustice to the students that you're bringing in. If you're just looking at creating opportunities for students that exist on your campus, like you just want to create a space for them to play, like sure, you can do things, right? But if you're launching an esports program with the objective of recruiting students into the university, which is, 99% of the time, that's the goal right now. Right. It's only appropriate that you do justice. And that doesn't necessarily mean you have to hire 3 or 4 or 5 full-time staff on day one. For a lot of these programs, it is appropriate to have 1 person on that first year just to kind of set that foundation. What we had at Illinois Wesleyan was pretty similar. We had 1 person, and we had a roadmap to have 1 person. And this kind of is a testament to the Illinois Wesleyan support, is that the fact that like I came in, built this out, and then said, hey, we need these resources to do X, Y, and Z. And they were willing to adjust, right? And so programs these days, as they're launching esports programs, they need to prepare to adjust, right? Like they need to have a plan that says, we are going to build out X, Y, and Z. Because again, if you're recruiting students to come to your university, it's not appropriate that there's one full-time staff for 30 kids over 6 different games, right? And we're just not at a level where that investment exists yet, but we can do our part to hopefully make it change.
Well, and again, with most of these programs too, it isn't like NCAA football where Division I, where most I don't know of any Division I program that doesn't have basically full rides for all their players. Yes, there's scholarships, but as I've started to counsel kids too, just because a school offers you an esports scholarship doesn't mean it's in your financial interest even to take it. That it might be that, it's $2,000 or $3,000, but then out the gate, you're still shelling out $25,000 for that.
Yeah. And I think so. Like what I'll tell students 100% of the time, whether it's Illinois Wesleyan or elsewhere, do your research. Do your research, because the things that Illinois Wesleyan offers students is not the same as what Maryville offers students, and what Maryville offers students is not the same as Harrisburg, and what Harrisburg offers students is like, if like we don't offer full rides at Illinois Wesleyan. And so for a student to come to us, and we have really competitive teams, right? Like our League of Legends team is one of the top. Our Fortnite team is currently ranked number 3 in North America. Our Rocket League team is good, but we're working, and our Overwatch team, and et cetera, et cetera. You come to us because we have good schools, or we have a great school with good academics, right? And then we also have the esports program that can sit with that, right? So you have this situation where you are able to come in and genuinely get the best of both worlds. If your goal is to go pro and you're a challenger level League of Legends player, I would obviously tell you to come and play for us, because we do have an extremely good League of Legends coach, and we do have good teams, so you're not kind of isolated. But I would encourage you to check out Maryville and Harrisburg, right? But the student needs to do their research to understand what the school can offer them. If you're a challenger League of Legends player, don't go play for John Doe University in Iowa with a silver team average, right? Do your research. If your goal is to work in the medical field after college, and esports is just something you're doing in the meantime, okay, well, the full ride scholarship may or may not be everything you're looking for then. Instead, go to a better medical school, right? But none of that matters if kids don't do the research. Yep.
Yeah, it is really, I'm amazed that there's the combines and things going around. And I know right now, one of the hardest things for K-12, for a high school administrator, general manager, coach to do is with recruiting, because the nice thing I like about the NCAA, there's not a whole heck of a lot I like about the NCAA as an organization. But one of the things I do like is that they have some very definite rules around recruitment. Yeah. And what that looks like, and the time you can do it, and how many contacts you can make, and what channels you're supposed to take. It's not like you can just approach a kid who's a high schooler by yourself and just start offering them the world. There's protocols in place. Right. Again, with you saying, just as new as all of this is, you're able to build your program and define it however you want. There's a lot of that going on right now with recruiting, and I really worry. It's just like with the pros, even. One of our kids played in a tournament recently and was offered a Super Smash Brothers pro contract, and it's like, well, did you get a name? Did you get what's their credentials? And I've had kids who have been offered all kinds of things online without even seeing a person, having a conversation. Yep. There's a lot of that going on right now, where I feel like we really need to start to codify a lot of this, like what is acceptable, what is not acceptable, how should you approach these kids, especially the one thing in particular is pros, because kids who are 14, 15 years old, which is becoming the prime age for a lot of this stuff for them to get started, they'll throw $35,000. And for a family or for a kid, that may sound like a heck of a lot of money, but in reality, that $35,000 is a small bucket amount compared to what the team is really making and raking off of them and sometimes those kids end up having to pay their own travel fees. That $35,000 basically pays their experience. It doesn't actually earn them any money. So I really wish we could come up with a way to better do this.
Yeah. Well, and this kind of goes into the whole talking point of it being such a young industry, right? Like we don't have player support industries available right now, unless you're a pro player at the top of your line with $1 million contracts on the line, right? Where there's some real money coming in. High school students aren't getting into situations right now where they're represented by agencies who have done this, who have experience doing this, right? And yeah, it totally can be a predatory practice, because it's a business industry, right? Like the organization wants to make money.
And there's a lot of money coming into it, which makes it even more predatory. Well,
and one of the big things that kind of gets me anxious is that you have a lot of amateur organizations right now in the collegiate or amateur space that are offering $500 a month, right? Or $1,200 a month if you're just for an amateur team that's competing at the top of the amateur community. Mm-hmm. Okay, but like, what does it entail? And you often see like kids will have these contracts and sign them without consulting a lawyer or like being involved with their parents, and it's scary. Again, I think it's part to do with the industry being so young, right? We're just not at a point where those kind of resources exist, and I don't think they will until real money gets sunk into it. So one of the things that I often talk about is there needs to be a talent injection in collegiate and high school. So what do I mean by that? That right now the salaries are so low in collegiate that you are not seeing resources being invested in professional players, professional organization teams, coaches, directors of esports organizations, whatever it may be. Once these big schools like Alabama and Stanford and Maryland and all them get involved and they start offering $80,000 salaries for a director plus, right? You're going to start seeing people like Double Lift and Mewtwo King and people with like professional esports experience when they start to retire, instead of going on and working in their organization, they may come and run a collegiate esports program, right? Right now, the money's just not there because most directors are making like $40,000 a year. No pro player is going, if that, right? That's generous. Yeah. No pro player is going to leave Team Liquid to come and work in the collegiate space, right? But one day that investment will be there. And whether it's pro players, people in the industry, it could be the general manager for Team EG or Evil Geniuses, for example. Like there is going to be this like injection. And then once that person comes in, they're going to network for their friends, and then they're going to have more people come in. And that's good. We want that. Because it will make our space more competitive. It'll bring in higher salary rates for more schools. It'll bring in more schools, which will influence the lower schools to put more money in. But those people will also bring a set of experience that is going to empower those students to say like, okay, hey, like I've had experience talking to these organizations about contracts. I have a network of people. Oh, you've got a contract from Team Solo Mid for $500,000 a year. Why don't we connect you with my agent and have them working with you, right? So like we're in this infant stage right now where the people making decisions in collegiate esports, some of them are great, some of them are meh, some of them have no experience whatsoever. And we will get to a point where you've got the big dogs of the esports world coming in and making the space better, because it's not going anywhere, right? Like it's going to be here, and it's just going to be like a professional football coach going into the college space when they start to retire, right?
I'm waiting for, here's where Marquette University is just up the road from me. I know they made a very large announcement that hasn't followed through about being this huge Division I esports program. They were going to be under the Big East. They were going to go varsity, all of this. And nothing, there was no follow through, unfortunately, with that, at least. But I look at that school and I go, gosh, when we talk about how these programs are starting to evolve and change, they have a law school there. Why are you not offering, have your law students working at least with your club level people who may be getting some of these advances or offers, but to become, teaching them to become agents in this space. Here's the one I wish would happen because, again, Purdue Boilermaker grad, and one of their strategic goals is around their patents. You're a mechanical engineering school, or you have an electrical engineering school. All of this that we're doing right now comes down to the speed and the accuracy of a device like this. It's all mechanical. There should be, it's not just the esports business program. It isn't just that. I mean, you talk about how these programs can start to define themselves at the collegiate level. Right. I have said, Purdue, my God, if you want to start making that patent money, those ideas, engineering schools should be all over this, just finding every little technical advantage they can, the faster processor, how can you make things more efficient? Esports could actually push a technological revolution in a lot of ways as the money starts to come into this and people start to think that way.
You're 100% right. And so like, have you ever heard of a company called Redefine?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, they make furniture.
As a teacher, you should know Bradford.
Yeah, they make carts.
Yep, they're the carts. Exactly right. The ones where you wheel in the TV in the beginning of a movie day or whatever when you're a kid. So we actually had students last year doing an internship at Bradford as part of our engineering students at Wesleyan. And they focused on esports devices, right? And they talked about storage, and they talked about laptop things and portable broadcast stations and like the whole 9 yards, right? You're 100% right. And so I'm speaking at the Esports Business Summit next week. And one of those the entire presentation, I shouldn't say one of the talking points, the entire presentation is built around getting value and stakeholders invested in esports around campus, right? So not just being esports, not just utilizing esports for gaming and opportunities within gaming, right? If you have a communications department, this is something that Boise State does really well. It's something that Illinois State does really well. Utilizing your communications department for broadcasting and content creation. Illinois Wesleyan has a really big nursing department, and I've always had the vision in the back of my mind of incorporating our nursing students and having them doing things like carpal tunnel prevention and posture checks and things like that, right? If you have a marketing department, have them involved in your teams. If you have a hospitality department, have them involved in creating events, right? There are a lot of opportunities that come with an esports program that creates value for your esports students, as well as every other single student on your campus, right? And you really have the potential to make esports larger than life. Do you know why that's not happening right now, though?
No.
Because schools are running esports programs with 60 kids with one full-time staff, right? So like,
well, that's a great answer. Yes.
so like you are stretching these.
But wait, but before you dive into that, I feel too that is, again, people are looking at the computers and the technology, and they're not thinking beyond like you said, if your goal is recruitment, then your goal is recruitment. But again, I always tell people at the K-12 level, and even the collegiate program schools that I've talked to that have said, well, what should we do with our esports program? I said, well, what are your strategic goals of your university? Start with those.
Yep. Well, that's the thing. So at the collegiate level, the strategic goal is recruitment, right? I mean, there's a reason D1 schools are slow to get invested in esports right now. And it's not because it's not a great opportunity to get into, it's because D3 schools are hurting for recruitment. Therefore, D3 schools bring in esports to increase recruitment and enrollment.
And lower, I believe it's also they are having a trouble recruiting males in particular to the universities. Yeah.
And so esports fills that hole, right? That's the goal of esports. And it's short-sighted. I 100%, 1,000,000% believe it's short-sighted, right? We talked about like those, like having a 5-year plan, having a 10-year plan. Schools are looking at esports as a recruitment opportunity right now. And that's fine. It is a recruitment opportunity. But it's so much more. But you don't get the so much more unless you dive in with 2 feet and support the esports program. And so what's happening is that 99% of the colleges that exist in the collegiate space right now, you have one full-time staff and 20 kids, it could be 30 kids, whatever it may be, who are so focused on recruitment. That takes up, let's say, 10 to 15 hours a week, right? Well, now they're also coaching 20 to 30 kids. Okay, that takes up another 15 to 20 hours a week. Then you have administrative responsibilities, whether it's academic welfare, checking in with students, having one-on-ones, whatever it may be, talking with parents, talking with the university, takes up another 5-10 hours a week. And those numbers are obviously all over the place and vague, but you're already getting at a full-time job, right? Now we're going to turn around and say, okay, but we also want you to develop a computer science relationship. We also want you to develop nursing. We also want you to develop events and marketing. We also want you to work on communication and being this big platform. It's just not feasible. And so until universities start investing in esports programs, so like for us, so at Illinois Wesleyan, we have 2 full-time staff now. The way that, or 3 full-time staff, the way that we develop this program,
don't forget yourself.
Yeah. So developing this, the way we develop the structure of this program enables us to say, okay, so TJ, my League of Legends coach, oversees our Smash team. He doesn't coach the Smash team, but he oversees them. So when students are having academic check-ins or personal issues or whatever it may be, rather than streamlined to me, they go to TJ, right? He also oversees the league team. Lorenzo oversees our Fortnite team. Okay. So that removes the responsibility of, not responsibility, but like the overarching support from me to those people. And then I oversee our Rocket League team, which is 4 people. Okay. And we've just brought in a great student coach, or not student coach, a part-time remote coach, Ryu. So even more responsibility removed from me. That now enables me to focus on summer camps. It allows me to focus on speakers that we want to bring in the spring. It allows me to focus on other diversity and inclusivity and inclusion methods. It allows me to focus on the bigger picture, right? Where we want esports to be in 5 years, so that we can focus on the strategic goals of the university, right? We are a very forward-thinking university. We want to build a really big platform around computer science, right? And we want to work with organizations like the Boys and Girls Club and State Farm to run a STEM summer camp. And we want to provide scholarships for these summer camps so that students from underprivileged communities can have the opportunity that other students get that they might not traditionally get, right? So we have this ability to focus on the bigger picture now. But the only reason we have that ability is because the university supported everything else to get us to where we needed to be. If I was alone at this on this ship right now, there's no way I would be able to do all these other things to focus on the strategic focuses of the university, because I'm so focused on getting everything else done, right?
Yeah. Well, and that again goes back to your point before of all these people trying to do it on a shoestring budget. And you said, $40,000 investment. What can we do? Don't. Again, the person who I talked to at Marquette who was charged with doing the esports, getting the esports program going, also has the job of being the head of communications for the basketball teams. And it's like, well, wait a second. Basketball at Marquette is a big deal.
It's a huge deal.
What time do you have to then do something that you're like not even really thinking about at that point, when you have to, like, again, especially some of the players they've had come through recently, it's like you're traveling with the basketball team. So it makes a heck of a lot of sense what you're talking about as far as, that long-term investment. And what I'm not hearing you say, even though it may, to some people may have started off sounding like this, maybe at the beginning, you're not a pipeline to the pros.
No. Yeah. So, and there's yes. So no, we are not. I view us as a pipeline into the industry. So when I started in esports, so I started out as a player, right? We talked about that a little bit. I started out as a player. I played Halo competitively. When I got into college, I realized that I didn't necessarily want to spend as much time as I was competing. So I moved into the administrative side of things, running events, traveling. I mean, I went to like Canada on my own dime just to help run a tournament. All of this just to build resume experience, right? I wanted to start writing, so I started writing, and I got a job at CounterLogic Gaming. I got a job at Red Bull, just doing freelance work, and that all turned into my first job. I tell students all the time, if you want to do something in esports, you just need to do it, right? If you want to start writing, start writing. If you want to start creating content, start creating content. If you want to run events, run events. If you want to compete, compete, right? Just start. I don't think students have the responsibility these days that they need to create the opportunities for themselves. I think it's good. It shows initiative and it shows perseverance, but I don't think a student should necessarily feel like they need to create those individual opportunities for themselves, because people like me exist, and because people like Michael Jones at Drury exist, because people like Clerky exist, because people like Adamantor at Aquinas exist. We exist to create those opportunities for students. So students can come into my program and say, I really want to get into coaching. Okay, well, let's create an opportunity for you to do coaching, right? I have a student that this still resonates with me, CJ. And CJ came into my office one day and said, I'm interested in doing what you do. I was like, well, what do you mean? And he goes, I'm interested in being a head coach or a director of an esports program after I graduate. Okay, well, let's create those opportunities within Illinois Wesleyan that will enable you to at least start getting those internships and start getting those first opportunities. And so I don't necessarily view ourselves as a pipeline to pros. Like, I mean, like, I'd love to be, and like, I think we have the resources to be, right? Like, we have a full-time head coach. There are very few schools that have full-time head coaches, right? And so I certainly wouldn't say we're not a path to the pro teams. I hope to be, and I would love to be. I would say, like, in terms of going pro, Maryville and Harrisburg are your two best options. They're full ride programs. They both have fantastic coaching staff, and they have a lot of eyes on them. I would say after those two schools, if your opportunities are to looking to go pro, you come to us. Because again, we have the coaching staff, we have the network, and we have those connections, but then we're also focusing on the holistic approach of education as well. And so, like, I hate, like, this isn't a nice way to put it, but like, I've had conversations with students where I said, like, hey, if this is your goal, go to Maryville. Okay. If you can't get into Maryville, come to us.
Well, and Dr. Katrina Atkins, she popped in a question here about, should we have esports majors? You know, last week when I spoke with Kevin Brown, you know, we talked about this ecosystem that is around esports. And while you can set up those experiences for kids, like, you know, shoutcasting or doing the social media management or, you know, running an event or things of that nature, it is, to me, again, it's through the intrinsically motivating thing that they love to do, which is around a game or around the competition itself, right? Yep. You know, to be the host, to be the MC of that event. Those things translate so well into so many other things. 100%. Like, as Kevin was talking about, he was in the hotel industry for many years. And in fact, ran, I think, some CTE programs on like hotel restaurant management. Right. You know, even the kids who are working in food service, you know, you could think like, you know, just feeding everybody. Like when we did our state championships at Madison College it feels like a million years ago anymore, but last winter in December, you know, just I was looking at this amazing cafeteria that they had and just everything that was going on. And I'm thinking, like, you know, they didn't even like try, they had it open for us, but they didn't really even try to do anything like special. It was just how they were running it. But imagine if there was that one kid on campus who was like, you know what, I want to turn this event into like a themed dinner, and just the budgeting and the planning and the prep work. Because I used to work in restaurant. My mother's a pastry chef, so I've worked in restaurants before. Yeah. There's so much that goes on that you don't even see around that. Like, yeah, it may sound great that we could do, like, for example, lobster tails. I don't know, but your food cost is through the roof and you're not going to make much money off of it. Right. Again, I think it's okay to have majors like what Staffordshire has done and Ohio State, but I don't think it's absolutely necessary to do specific to esports. Yeah, no. And I tell students 10 out of 10 times, the experience is more beneficial than the major. If you're looking to work in esports, you don't need an esports degree to accomplish that, right? Focus on marketing, focus on sports management, focus on hospitality, focus on business even. Because at the end of the day, if you're applying for jobs like Evil Geniuses or Illinois Wesleyan University, you can have a degree in law enforcement and homeland security and still make a meaningful impact if you have experience. And it's also one of these things that kind of scares me about this industry right now, is that we rely on student leaders too much. And I don't think that's a bad thing, just to be we're all clear about grassroots though. Yep. Well, so here's the thing. There's so much grassroots you can do. Right. And so here's my issue with it. Student leaders are phenomenal. We have some incredibly good student leaders around the United States. With 100% certainty, I would never doubt that. I don't think we are cultivating those student leaders to be the best that they can be, because right now a lot of those student leaders are leading the programs entirely with minimal mentorship and guidance, and they're doing great work. But what's going to happen? So let's say I leave Illinois Wesleyan, and the job gets offered to one of our student leaders. Okay. This just in, Callum Fletcher is leaving Illinois Wesleyan. He just announced it. No, I was kidding. He's not. But let's say the job gets given to one of our student leaders, right? Okay. And maybe Illinois Wesleyan's a bad example of this because we've already expanded and grown. So how about Boise State? Let's say but Boise State's not even a good one. Let's say John Doe University. John Doe University is a student-led club. It's a student-led club. They don't even have a varsity program yet. Okay. And the school turns around and says, "Hey, you've ran the student club for 4 years. We want you to come in and run this program." Okay. Okay. Now I'm getting you. Okay. We're gonna give you $30,000 a year to make this a varsity sport. You're in charge of recruiting and X, Y, and Z. Okay. If this student leader does not have good mentorship coming into this role, their growth is going to be stunted. Because they're not going to know how to negotiate contracts and salaries. They're not going to know how to
build a roadmap for sustainability for 10 years. They're not going to know how to build an ecosystem that focuses on all these other pieces of the puzzle, right? Whereas if the student leader has good mentorship and guidance, so I'm not saying this is like a clear cut 100 across the board case, right? If a student leader has mentorship and guidance, there's a lot that they can do. And some of these student leaders are the most passionate people in the space, without a doubt. If a student leader does not have that mentorship and support, then they're just being utilized. And I think that's an issue. I don't think student coaches should be head coaches. Honestly, I think it's inappropriate. And I get kind of people tilt their head like you did there.
Well, I'll tell you why in a minute, but go on, please.
Do you have any kids?
I do. I have 3 kids.
Boy, girl?
2 girls. Youngest is 16, 14, and 12. Okay.
Yeah. So let's say your 16-year-old girl is being recruited to play softball.
Okay.
At the university.
She never would because she's all about spaghetti arms and she's just like, ew. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm
just kidding, but yeah, go ahead. We'll just say that all of a sudden
for
my oldest.
Context, she's a rock star. She's getting recruited to play at the University of Alabama, right? Okay. I have no idea who's good in softball, but let's say she's getting recruited to play at Nebraska. UCLA. Yeah. She's getting recruited to play at Nebraska. And they want her to come play softball for her and be on the starting varsity team as a freshman, blah, 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 blah. And the head coach is a student. What would you say? Well,
the reason why I would say no is because the culture, and I think I know where you're taking me down, but the culture has been established that there is funding for softball. Title IX has helped a lot with that, especially, but the funding is there at other universities where they could go and get that real, I won't say a real coach, but a better
experience.
Coach.
And that better coach will offer more life advice and support and guidance and mentorship than a student coach will ever provide. Right. And so it's tough because like, I think there are a lot of really good student coaches. Right. But I think there's more to a coach role that esports kind of cuts out than should be cut out. Right. People always say, like, there's always this hot topic on Twitter that like esports coaches shouldn't need bachelor's degrees to be coaches. It's a hot topic in the.
I have not seen that, but
oh man,
my gosh.
So and it's because it comes around every time there's a good job posting in collegiate. And it happened when we posted ours. It happened when Grandview posted theirs. Whenever there's a good paid position in collegiate esports, you get a lot of people from the amateur community who don't have degrees yet who are applying for these jobs, right? Gotcha. And a lot of these people are great coaches, right? No doubt about it. They are great coaches in terms of game coaching. But there's so much more that goes into these roles that I think is often overlooked. And so where does that mentorship and guidance come from if you don't have someone who has the ability to mentor and guide you? So that's kind of where my mental comes in with this idea that like we have student coaches that are head coaches. Okay, I don't necessarily think that's appropriate, right? I mean,
well, let me push back. And just because, again, this is probably the difference between collegiate and K-12.
Sure.
Okay. Again, I feel that they're collegiate and K-12. When people say, well, we're going to put all scholastic together, I'm like, you can't.
Yep. Like
community guidelines can't be the same for both because our goals are both very different. Our setups, how students come to us is even very different. Like you're, for example, using it as a recruiting tool, by and large.
Yep.
We're using it as a retainment tool. We already have the kids there and we're trying to get them from 14 years old with no credits to walk that graduation stage so they can go to college.
And you're trying to create opportunities that keep them there and keeps them happy and engaged and excited.
Right. Now, again, the way that we are operating though, and again, this is where it's really important to talk about the difference. We have teachers who are involved in the space regardless. But if you're going to have a club, it doesn't matter what club it is at a high school or even middle school, you have to have a teacher involved.
Right.
A lot of my teachers who are involved, and I call them general managers on purpose. We do not call them coaches because telling them they're a coach creates a mindset that they have to be the expert in the room. And it's really hard for a high school teacher to not be the expert in a room.
Totally agree.
One of the hard, and I felt that I'm sorry I was a bit presumptuous when I started asking you about your high school experience because
not at all.
Because, well, again, I know the area, but it doesn't mean you had a good experience in high school, and it was presumptuous.
I loved high school. I had a great experience in high school.
Good. I'm glad I wasn't too presumptuous.
Nope, you're good.
But it's important to say, though, that, that general manager role doesn't mean you have to be the expert. You can organize, be there for the kids, mentor the kids, make sure that any disruptions take place. But again, that whole idea that that person who's never played Overwatch before or never played Smash Brothers before now has to tell people how to play it. When, again, I have some kids who have just lived, breathed, and died it. I like that dynamic in this instance.
And I totally agree with you.
Okay. I think that dynamic is really important because you don't see this in high school football where the offensive lineman or some water boy or, whatever the role is going to the head coach and saying, I really think you should run this play, or, your offense is complete garbage or whatever. So, well, yeah. So I totally agree with you. And we kind of touched on this early in the discussion that like there's a different expectation between collegiate and high school right now. Mm-hmm. But specific to this point, and to be totally transparent, I think high school will get to a point where they have coaches as well. Mm-hmm. I agree. A long time down the road, like probably like 20 years at the earliest. Well, I will say we do have one now who actually came up through our program. He's in college now, but he was so good as a coach. It's like, we're bringing him back. Yep.
And so I think that ecosystem will exist, but specifically, I'm specifically, when I talk about student head coaches, I specifically talk about the collegiate space. Mm-hmm. Because and specifically talking about like the head coach overseeing 6 different games, right? At that point, it's not a head coach, it's a general manager.
Right.
Because
or director of esports.
Or director of esports, because you cannot expect someone to have expertise in 6 different games, let alone 3 different games, right? Let alone 2, unless they're a superstar. And so I wholeheartedly agree with you that there is a certain dynamic, but if a university is utilizing a student head coach to recruit and bring in students, I don't feel like that is an appropriate justice to the student that you are recruiting, because 9 times out of 10, that student head coach is not as capable. And I don't even know if capable is the right word.
They don't carry the same weight, if you will. Maybe it's...
They don't have the same experiences, right? They don't have the same life experiences. There's situations that I have handled that I think back to like, okay, if I was an 18-year-old, how would I have handled this? And it is not at all how I would have handled it today, right? And so it's I think student leaders need to be in the space. I 100% think they need to be in the space. They deserve to be in the space, and they are rock stars. There are a ton of student leaders that are probably going to be very upset that I'm saying all of these things. I think in order to support those student leaders' success, they need to be given more tools. That's not bad for anybody. And I think those tools come in the form of having true and proper mentorship and leadership, right? So for us, for example, we have a student League of Legends coach. And that student has a lot of responsibility. That student literally coaches a full team. But he does everything that he does with the support and mentorship of our League of Legends full-time head coach who has played professionally, who has played competitively in the collegiate space, who has worked in the industry with Cloud9 and with us, and has the ability to handle these certain situations. And the situations that he's not comfortable handling, he's able to approach me and talk to me about it, right? And so that situation is preparing our student head coach, or our student coach, I shouldn't call him a head coach, our student coach, 10 times more beneficially than if that student did not have any mentorship or guidance, right? Is that...
And here's what you're talking about. Let's go back to that whole growth of college football.
Yep.
I mean, if you look at, let's take the University of Notre Dame, right? My dad went there. I got a Newt Rockne story, and my grandfather was there at seminary for 4 years. I mean, Notre Dame is in my family blood. I went to Purdue instead. Sure. But, Newt Rockne was a student coach. Now, again, this was, 1920s when college football was still, and let's not forget, college football at that point was 25 years old. This is how slowly college football grew. It didn't grow like collegiate esports is going right now. But dang it, there's so many similarities that what you just said, and you talked about, that mentorship piece, where we are right now. A lot of people, it's just that similarity is just there. And we need to, as what I'm thinking you're saying is, we really should almost skip past that thing. Like, yeah, it may have worked in the 1910s teens and 20s with college football, but it doesn't have to be this way with collegiate esports.
Right. Well, the challenge is like, again, we're just too young. The investment's not there. And we talked about it earlier where like the investment is going to massively change over X amount of years. Right. Because the big schools will get involved. The big schools don't feel the pressure to get involved right now because they're not hurting for recruitment. When they do get involved, the investment is going to trickle down into the rest of the collegiate space, because in order for Maryville to stay competitive, XYZ is going to happen. And Duke is going to say, okay, well, we're not going to let Kentucky beat us, right? And Maryland is going to come in and be like, okay, well, we can't let Stanford beat us, or whatever it may be. So that investment will happen and that will come in. It's just not there yet. When that investment does start happening, I mean, staffing is going to elevate, structure is going to elevate, opportunities for students are going to elevate. Like the entire ecosystem has so much growing to do right now that largely comes from investment, and the right people running the show. And the right people running the show is also one of those things that can and will come in with investment.
Mm-hmm. All right. We're already to an hour, believe it or not. I mean, this hour has flown by, but I have 2 more questions for you.
Sure. Let's hear them.
All right. Number 1, how did Buck Hunt prepare you for all this?
Yeah. Buck Hunter prepared
Buck Hunter, sorry. Yeah,
no,
Hunter.
you're good. You're good. Buck Hunter prepared me for
First
this.
of all, tell people what Buck Hunter is, because a lot of people have probably seen it, but they just don't realize they've seen it.
Yeah, it's the hunting game you find in bars, right? It's the 2 shotguns and you're hunting wild animals and that's it, right? Believe it or not, that game has a competitive community where people make like big money every year. There's a world championship, the whole 9 yards. I got a lot of skills from Big Buck Hunter. One was learning how to work autonomously, right? Without having someone over your shoulder telling you what to do and how to do it. I learned how to give and receive feedback really well because I worked with a really awesome community of people that wanted me to succeed, but also like there's a lot of collaboration when you're working on a world championship, right? Mm-hmm. There's a ton that goes into it. Time management was really big from learning how to working there. And in general, like, honestly, it's hard to pinpoint one thing that like, I think it really taught me, without just saying it taught me how to be a good worker. Communication was definitely amplified there. Knowing kind of where I wanted to be and helping facilitate that. Like I came in and there was a world championship that already existed there. And once I kind of got my chops, they let me get more involved with the world championship to the point where like I was flying to Las Vegas to negotiate contracts. And going to Vegas with like 1 or 2 other people and going literally casino to hotel, scouting venues for where we could be at for the next world championship. Right. Mm-hmm. And so Big Buck Hunter threw me into the fire. It was a lot of like, you're just going to go and you're just going to learn how to do it. And that actually prepared me for Illinois Wesleyan pretty well, because it was very much so like, this is where we are. This is where we want to be. Now go. Right. Mm-hmm. And so I would say that's probably the biggest thing is trial by fire prepared me for Illinois Wesleyan really, really well.
And it sounds to me, what I'm hearing also maybe a little bit is that, as somebody who's not an educator or, wasn't a AAA esports pro, we'll say, but you still saw in that experience with Big Buck Hunter, you saw potential. Like you saw like what could potentially be, what this could be in all of this. Yeah.
Big Buck Hunter is really cool because it allows you to, focus on the community. Like every single player in the Big Buck Hunter community, from the first place player down to like the 80th player, every single person will tell you community is the biggest and best thing about that game. The world championship is, you got to keep in mind, like the average age for a Big Buck Hunter is probably like 30 to 50, right? They're adults who don't typically get this kind of experience that 18-year-old kids do. And so when you get to the Big Buck Hunter World Championship, it's the vacation for these guys. And they bring their families, and it's like a big family reunion every year. It genuinely shows you community that is obviously a part of esports as a whole. But like, whereas other esports competitions feels like esports and then community, Big Buck Hunter World Championship felt like community and then esports, right? It felt like this big community coming together for the opportunity to be together. And then there was just a cool esports tournament happening on the side. Right. And so one of the great things about that is it just kind of deeply ingrained in my brain what esports was all about. And that's kind of been one of the pillars that we've built our program on. And it's part of why we're so successful.
The next question's a little more loaded.
Okay.
I don't know if this this could be a 2-second answer, or we could be here for another hour. I don't know.
Okay.
All right. Is there let's just take this from a pro perspective.
Okay.
Given that there's been, COVID has, I think, accelerated the run to esports, if you will, the money coming into it.
Okay.
2-part question. Is there a bubble? And even if there is, and that bubble pops, do you feel like your program will be negatively impacted by that?
Okay. So that's a good question. Are we talking a professional or collegiate bubble?
Well, I mean, I feel that perhaps if the bubble bursts at the pro level, you'll have some fallout. The collegiate level, I think, is going to happen more as states are starting to dole out money for the next couple of years, especially now that COVID has kind of thrown off tax revenues and everything's a little wonky right now with financing.
Right.
But let's take it from just a pro level perspective. Let's say there's a collapse, at the pro level.
I don't necessarily. So I do think there's a bubble at the pro level because a lot of these franchises, I mean, you're putting in $25 million a year plus salaries for players and whatever else may be. And a lot of these organizations are not turning profit. Right. I do think there's the potential risk that there is a bubble kind of being formed. I don't necessarily think collegiate is the same way because there's always going to be kids going to college. Right. Sure. And there's always going to be students looking to compete and be involved in this kind of experience. And there's always going to be schools that want to be the best. So I think the investment is safer in the collegiate space, largely because most of collegiate esports is not relying on sponsorship. Collegiate esports is relying on strategic investment budgets. They're relying on budgets, fundraising at the university level and whatever else may be. So I don't know if I would say there's necessarily a bubble being formed in the collegiate level. I don't know enough about like the professional investment to confidently tell you that I think there's a bubble being formed there. But I mean, logically it makes sense, Well,
let's think about this. Let's say, again, let's talk about the collegiate. Do you feel like if, let's say, several colleges start to cancel their teams, do you feel like you're going to be negatively impacted, or are you just going to be like, oh, come to me now?
Yep.
We've got. Do you feel bubble proof? I guess at IWU.
For a few reasons, right? Like we have successfully recruited over 100% for the last 4 years, or 3 years. Sorry. We have a proven track record with the program. We've got a track record with our staff structure. We got a track record with our students, our community, and our school. And so other schools closing down their program still does not negatively affect the quality of our program because we know what we have and we know what we've done, right? I think other programs shutting down could influence other programs to shut down or at least not open, right? I mean, if Stanford publicly commits to not bringing in esports because X, Y, and Z reason, well, maybe Maryland is going to do the same thing, right?
Yeah.
I think it's more likely we're going to see a domino effect in the other way, though. I think we're going to see one of those big power schools get on board, and there are other ones are going to. And we saw this happen with COVID, right? When COVID first started, schools started to shut down with 0 cases, right? Now, don't get me wrong. Like, I think schools should have shut down, but a lot of schools weren't shutting down because they should have shut down. They shut down because their direct competition nearby shut down. Therefore, as a PR move, they had to shut down, right? And like it's going to be a situation where, okay, if Alabama gets a program, who's Alabama's biggest rival?
Auburn.
If Alabama gets an esports program, Auburn is going to get an esports program, right? Even if they don't necessarily care about esports, they're going to say, okay, well, we're not going to let Alabama take this away from us, and then that's going to affect the next one and the next one and the next one and the next one. So I think we're going to see more likely a rise in the other way. But I do think we will see if there is a bubble that pops in the collegiate space. I think the lower level collegiate programs will hesitate, stammer, or back out maybe. But I think Illinois Wesleyan, I think we're pretty bubble proof. I think Maryville's bubble proof. I think like the Big 20, even like the big schools that you hear about that have successful recruiting, that have successful teams. I don't think any of them are going to go anywhere. I think they're only going to get bigger and better and more badass.
I got to say, that's the thing I love about collegiate esports is that it is not your typical players. It is again, a lot of kids
for now.
The story I like to share, and I shared this about Josh Knutson a couple weeks ago. When we launched our program in Racine in 2016, he reached out in an email to me about, hey, University of Jamestown, any of your kids interested in this? And it's like, I'm like, no, they don't want to go to Virginia.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, wait, no, you're not in Virginia, you're in North Dakota, which completely different, landscape and everything else. But that's the thing that a lot of people don't realize about this is just how uniquely, I think it's beautiful, really, that your school can step onto a stage with, a Big Ten school right now and kick the pants off of them.
Yep.
I think that's awesome.
I talk about that all the time with our administrators because it must really frustrate athletics knowing that we're taking down the University of Pennsylvania and Alabama, and we played UNC Charlotte, I guess UNC. Is it UNCC or is it UNC?
No, it's UNC. Yeah, no, it's
University
UNCC.
of North Carolina, Charlotte. Okay, so we played UNCC and we upset them in our Rocket League qualifiers. But our football team would never upset UNCC,
Never. In fact, it would probably be dangerous for your football to play them.
So it's kind of cool that happens right now. It's not going to happen for long, right? In 5-10 years, the big schools in traditional sports will be the big schools in traditional esports, because at the end of the day, and I hate to say this, and why one of the reasons why we're trying to build our program as bubble proof as possible right now is that when those big schools get on board, we want you to have a reason to come to us still, right? In 10 years, though, if you've got an opportunity to get a full ride from Illinois Wesleyan and a full ride from Stanford, and Stanford has a bigger facility and a better facility and more coaches and more staff, 9 times out of 10, you're going to choose Stanford over Illinois Wesleyan. Same with Maryville, right? Maryville is probably not going to be competitive with the University of Alabama. I also talk about our new facility.
Dr. Katrina was asking about that too in the chat. She wants to come see this, but your new facility is gorgeous.
Always welcome. Anyone is welcome to reach out to me and come check it out by all means. I think we are going to get to a point where athletics programs these days put out videos showing off their football locker rooms.
Yes.
And we've got a barber shop in our locker room, or we've got a wall of cleats that you can choose your cleats from, they have all these cool toys and gizmos and gadgets and features. We're going to get to a point where esports arenas are like that. 100%. And we're going to have, we've got a cool broadcasting room, and we've got individual streamer setups, and we've got a barber shop in our esports arena. These things will happen. I have no doubt that we will get to a point where the University of Texas is investing $5 million in building this insanely super, super cool esports arena. Right. Well, Illinois Wesleyan is not going to be competitive with the University of Texas in terms of investment. Right. So it's going to change. The landscape is going to change massively. I don't think necessarily the smaller schools will come in. I think it's going to be interesting because I think when those big schools get involved, we will need some sort of structure like at the NCAA D1, D2, and D3, because there is a finite number of students that play at a challenger level. And if they're all playing at the Big Ten schools, it doesn't make sense to have the University of John Doe in Iowa playing against the University of Texas, right? And the University of Texas doesn't want that investment to be wasted by having to play silver level players.
Right. And again, let's go back to college football. And as far back as the late 1960s, the Ivy League schools and the Naval Academy and in the Army were still some of the top programs in the United States. Nowadays, Ivy League doesn't even barely compete at a D1 level. Army and Navy has some good teams now and then, but Army really struggles. Again, it is this evolution that you're looking at. If you historically you want to look at something, to me, I say go look at the collegiate football programs of the past 100 years, and you'll probably see while the time may not be exactly the same, the pathway may be very much there.
Do you know who David Kirk is from Illinois State?
The name sounds really familiar.
He's the director of Illinois State's program, and he posted a picture. I'm scrolling through my feed right now. He posted a picture, and it says, 100 years ago, when collegiate football was still in its infancy, you saw things like this. And it's Cumberland versus Georgia Tech, October 7th, 1916, and the score was 222-0. And then the next line says, this is exactly what collegiate esports is right now.
That's wonderful. You need to retweet that if you haven't already.
No, I 100% I shared it, but like he's 100% right? Like
absolutely.
You have these big schools putting in the money and putting in the investment and building good teams, and then you have schools that are like, yay, esports.
Well, Callum Fletcher, this was probably the longest interview I've done for the Academy of Esports, but it is definitely the most dense. I mean,
good.
There was so much great stuff here for everybody to take away. Any final things that you wish to share as we head on out?
Yeah, I mean, just if anyone's watching, if you're interested in talking shop or talking about esports or learning how to do it at a collegiate level or has any questions, you can find me on Twitter at FlizzyFletch. My handle's right there.
There it is. Yeah, it's all backwards. I get screwed up too.
And then at the same time, if you have any questions, you can shoot me an email, cfletche@iw.edu. Happy to chat, happy to talk shop. Otherwise, thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
And again, I think we ran into each other maybe at the UCI conference last year, and it was like, oh, we'll just come back here and do this again next year, which didn't happen.
Yep.
But I will take you up on that offer. There's nothing I would love more than throw 5 high schools of kids down and bring them down to your space and hang out and see what that collegiate program looks like.
Happy to have them and happy to talk to them in the meantime virtually.
Absolutely. Callum Fletcher, thank you so much for being a guest on the Academy of Esports podcast today.
Thank you.
That will do it for this week on the Academy of Esports. I've been your host, James O'Hagan. Esports are organized competitive video games allowing schools to redefine their athletic culture, diversify opportunities for student participation, promote good physical and mental health, increase collegiate scholarship pathways, and play games. We can never forget the importance of play. The mission of the Academy of Esports is to support these ideals. The vision of the Academy of Esports is for all students to experience the fun and joy of playing competitive video games. You may follow me on Twitter at Jim O'Hagan. That's at JIMOHAGAN, and through the Academy of Esports account at TAO Esports. It's a great way to get the latest blog posts, podcast episodes, and news coming out of esports and education. And remember, you can continue your engagement by going to www.taoesports.com. You can also connect through Facebook at www.facebook.com/TAOesports. Thanks again for listening, and I look forward to our time again next week.